You'll find in your bulletin a diagram that says biblical family tree. Biblical family tree. I would encourage you to look that over, to keep it handy over the next couple messages as we get sort of deeper into the sons of Jacob, the Israelites, the 12 sons of Israel, as we sort of continue our look into families and how God desires to work in our families. So I would encourage you to look that over. And as it relates to Christmas, I'm going to encourage you to do something that you probably have not done, maybe ever, but probably for sure in a long time. I'm going to ask you to go to the beginning of Matthew and the beginning of Luke. Anybody know what's at the beginning of Matthew and the beginning of Luke? Genealogy. How does it read? Difficult. How does it sort of flow? And so-and-so begot somebody, and so-and-so begot somebody, and so-and-so begot somebody, and we go, man, days, I'm skipping to like chapter 2 or 3. Here's why I understand that's not the most exciting reading, but here's why I want you to take a look at that. Because as we come into the Christmas season, we've been looking at families and how God works in our families, and we recognize that what happens in our families, in spite of our best efforts, what happens in our families? Perfection, right? Isn't that what we see in Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? We end up with perfection in our families. What do we end up with in our families? Chaos, problems, contention, jealousy, drama. You had to get that one in there, right? We don't like to say it, do we? We don't like to say it. We're going to let somebody up front say it. We don't like to say it. We don't like to say that we have messes in our families. Go ahead and try it. Thanks, Jen. Go ahead and try it. You don't want to say that anywhere but here, do you? Do you know how hard it is for us to say that? We have messes in our families. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to admit it. In fact, a lot of times, we don't want to even admit it to ourselves. But that hampers us. What did we talk about in the very first message in this series? What did we talk about?
Passing the blame.
Yes, passing the blame. And instead of that, we should what?
Own up to it.
We should own up to our mistakes. We should own up to our messes. Because the moment we do, what does it do? It heals. Breaks the cycle. It keeps things what? From going any further? A little word starts with an S. It keeps things simple. It keeps things simple. To just stop and say, it's so hard. To just stop and say, I messed up. And let me own it. I'm going to ask forgiveness. Let's start off on the right foot. Because that's my heart's desire. And the reason I want you to take a look at the genealogies between now and Christmas is because some of those names you won't recognize, you definitely won't want to pronounce. You'll sort of be tempted, you'll get halfway through and you say, I don't think I'm going to do this, even though the preacher asked me to, I don't think I'm going to do this. But there are a couple names in there that might jump out at you as being names that you have heard before. And some of them are going to sound really nice rolling off your mouth, like David. And you say, oh, I know that guy. Yeah, boy, he was a pretty famous, great king, a man after God's own heart. And, we know a couple things about David that weren't nice. That, he made some very sinful decisions. But King David was a pretty famous guy. But then you're going to hear here's some things like Rahab and Ruth and Tamar. And in particular with Tamar, if you go back and look at the story of Tamar, really Tamar got put in a situation that situation was messy because of Judah, one of the sons. It's on your chart. Judah violated a principle of God. Actually, several. And because of that, Tamar was put in a precarious situation. But if you look at those genealogies and you start to research some of those people in the Bible, you will find that in spite of family messes, God used those people. In spite of family messes, God used those people. You see, that's the beauty of this whole thing. It is impossible for you and I to come from a perfect family. It's impossible for you and I to produce a perfect family. Our goal is to live according to God's principles and to have a perfect heart toward God. But no matter what in the course of life, there will be some kind of mess that enters into our family dynamic. And the good news is, God can still use you. God can still use your family. God can still work through you. Through that genealogy line, through a very human genealogy, Jesus Christ came and stepped onto the scene and said, I am come as the Savior of the world. To be able to say, I'm going to serve the Lord God with all of my heart, mind, and strength. I'm going to walk after His principles. And I know that in spite of my family not being perfect, God wants to use me. Your imperfect family walking with God can absolutely impact the world. Absolutely impact the world. Turn with me just briefly to Genesis chapter 28. Genesis chapter 28. In weeks following, we're going to dive into the 12 sons of Jacob. But I just want to set sort of a framework for that, a beginning and an ending, put a dynamic around it. Genesis chapter 28. You know that because of the deceit that happened between Jacob and Esau, last week we looked at where their mother Rebekah, while Esau was out, caused Jacob to go in and deceive Isaac and take the rightful blessing, the inheritance blessing. As a result of that, Esau was very angry. Esau said, I'm going to finish my brother off. I'm going to take care of my brother. I'm not going to stand for this. And Rebekah counseled Jacob to flee. And Jacob took off, headed towards Rebekah's brother's place, towards Laban's place, where he ultimately found wives and continued his family there, and we'll look at that later. But that was not the only thing that happened. Genesis chapter 28, starting with verse 6, says this: When Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob and had sent him away to Paddan Aram to take him a wife from there, and that as he blessed him, he gave him a charge, saying, "You shall not take a wife of the daughters of Canaan." And that Jacob had obeyed his father and mother and was gone to Paddan Aram. And Esau, seeing that the daughters of Canaan pleased not Isaac his father. And this next verse, it's really, really real. Then went Esau unto Ishmael, and took unto the wives which he had Mahlah the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, the sister of Neobeth, to be his wife. Now the short paraphrased version of that reads exactly like this. When Esau realized that getting a wife out of the daughters of Canaan, out of the local land, would highly displease and disappoint his father and mother, and that Jacob, who had deceived him, went off to be obedient to his father and mother, that Esau made up his mind to do exactly the opposite and to pursue exactly what would displease his father and mother. That's exactly what it says. He realized that taking a daughter from the local region would make them angry and displeased, and because of what they had done to him, he straight away went out and did exactly that. And said, "Take this." Now I want you to consider this. If we consciously contradict our principles without making it right, our children will actively rebel against our faith. Now, before you get all tangled up in that, we make our own decisions as free moral agents. So I am not saying that if a child goes out and does something contrary to God's principles, that the parents are to blame. That's not what I'm saying. There are plenty of children that have made decisions, and it's definitely not the fault of their parents. What I'm saying is this: if as parents, if as adults, if as leadership, we consciously contradict our principles, and we do not go back and make it right, we will foster rebellion against our faith in those that we are leading. Why? Because they're going to pick out that contradiction just like that. So here was Isaac and Rebekah proclaiming to follow God, and yet Rebekah pulled the fast one and blatantly deceived her husband, blatantly went under and deceived Esau, made a mess of the thing, and at no point went back and put a stop to it, time out, hold on, I messed up, let's make this right, that was a dumb thing to do. And Esau actively rebelled against the principles of their God. Be considerate that when we find out we have consciously violated a principle that we proclaim, we need to go back and make it right, or it will foster active rebellion against those principles. There's a fair amount of life that gets lived. We're going to talk about that later, but I want you to jump over to Genesis chapter 32. Genesis chapter 32. Starting with verse 24. And Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, "Let me go, for the day breaks." And Jacob said, "I will not let you go except you bless me." And he said unto Jacob, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." And he said, "Your name will be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince hast you power with God and with men, and hath prevailed." Jumping down to verse 1 of chapter 33. And Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau came, and with him 400 men. And he divided the children unto Leah and unto Rachel and unto the 2 handmaids. Skipping over to verse 7. And Leah also with her children came near and bowed themselves, and after came Joseph near and Rachel, and they bowed themselves. And Esau said, "What do you mean by all this drove that I have met?" And Jacob said, "These are to find grace in the sight of my Lord." And Esau said, "I have enough, my brother. Keep that you have unto yourself." You can continue reading there. We'll get back into that. But this is after Jacob and his wives had had sons and daughters. They were traveling back to the land of Canaan. They were going to meet into Esau. Jacob was scared to death. And Scripture tells us that he had an encounter with God where God said to Jacob, "Jacob, tell me who you are." And finally, in the end, Jacob said, "Okay, my name is Jacob." And he with that, unloaded all of the baggage that he had carried along with that name. He said, "This is who I am, God. This is what comes along with my life." And God said, "I'm going to bless you." And the next morning, whenever he met Esau, they wept in each other's arms. We cannot force healing. But God can facilitate healing. The first step to God facilitating healing in relationships is for us to say, "God, this is me. This is the baggage that I bring. This is the walk that I've walked. This is the role that I have played. God, here I am. This is me." And when we finally get willing to do that, a little bit like saying we have messes in our families, when we finally get willing to do that, God can step in and God will produce, facilitate as much healing as the parties are willing to walk. We want to bring our families back to God's principles. That's God's desire too. We want healing in our families. That's God's desire too. The very first step is for us to come before God and say, "God, here I am. This is my walk.